Hi, everybody. The mayor is signing in right now, and we are live streaming. And who is member 9? Who is member 9 iPhone, so I can rename you?
That's Jenny Honeycutt.
Oh, hey, Jenny.
Hey, Liz.
Hey, everybody.
Mayor Tuck.
How y'all doing?
Fine.
Good. Well, thank you for everybody coming together. I guess we got a few more folks coming on board, and I want to thank everybody's involvement and work on this. I think we're making some progress. I think we'll be talking today about some good possibilities for us to get some funding to make a difference in the drainage basin, which would be great. I did want to let y'all know Ross Appel, Councilmember Appel, cannot be with us. He's a new daddy. He just had a baby girl day before yesterday. He and his lovely wife Alexis. So he's playing dad today and won't be with us. And I did want to thank. This may be her last meeting as a council member, Councilmember Jackson, because I think I've noted before, and you all know, it was really Carol's leadership that brought us together as a task force. And Carol, we really thank you for that. That was very insightful, and kudos to you. Thank you very much. So I just came from the clinic, got my shot. I feel fine, but kind of to share the good work today, I'm going to call on my co-chair, Mayor Woolsey, to conduct the meeting today. I'll be with you, but I'm going to take a little more of the back seat today and listen in. And thank you all again for being on this task force. Mayor Woolsey.
Thanks a lot, Mayor Tecklenburg. And, I want to share your thanks for Councilwoman Jackson and all the work she's done. Our first item on the agenda is actually introduction of new members and welcome to guests. Well, I'm not really sure who our guests are or new members, but welcome. Is there anyone here new who would like to introduce themselves?
Mayor, we've invited Jacob Berkey with Wolpert to join us.
I see. Jacob, would you say hi and where you're from?
Hi there. Jacob Berkey. Live on James Island. Work for Wolpert, water resources engineer and a project manager here. Studied at Clemson, biosystems engineering. Excited to be here and to help out in this watershed. Thanks.
Well, thank you and welcome. So if there's no further guest or introduction, let's go to Watershed Management Plan presentation. Will Vesey. Will?
Vice Chair, we're going to have to table Mr. Vesey's presentation. He was, again, unable to be with us, so but I think it'll be worth waiting for. So please put it on a future agenda.
Well, we'll be sure to do that. I would like to just share with the committee that I was hoping at this meeting that we would be recommending the watershed management plan to the jurisdictions, to the 3 governments to adopt as our basic plan. So let's tentatively plan to be prepared to vote to make a recommendation to the local governments that we adopt this plan. All right, so let's go ahead and with no objections, since we don't have Mr. Vesey to present it, let's go to working group updates. Do we have an update from the technical committee? Ashley?
Hi, yes, we do. So the stormwater managers have been meeting and discussing the testing as well as the sites. The technical committee formally met earlier this week, and Jacob joined us and went over the summer results. And I'm not sure if maybe Brett wants to speak first before Jacob maybe gives an overview.
Sure, just real quick. I think Jacob, you was maybe speaking item 5 below, but expound maybe a little later. I don't know, but I think we had on our monitoring plan James Island testing sites 1 and 2, 2 being the Upland Folly Road Bridge, and could not get that full access to that private dock earlier in the summer, so we went further upstream to the Riley Road access. And so that might be what people might see in the summer report a little differently. We do plan on testing at Riley Road and Folly Road Bridge in the next few months to see how they correlate, and then make sure that Folly Road Bridge is our designated testing site number 2 moving forward. So that was the only thing that might cause some confusion moving or looking or reviewing the summer quarterly report. The technical committee will meet again maybe in January after we get the fall report being October, November, December of this year. So we'll be looking at that in January and seeing how we might need to adjust anything if necessary.
So as Brett said, we'll get the report from Walpert, from Jacob Berkey at the next agenda item. Is there anything else about the technical committee that you'd like to share? Hearing nothing there. Let's go to citizens education engagement. Andrew Wonderly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We met earlier this week and had a great discussion, and I think lined up some good priorities for moving forward. So one of the things, we're hoping to coordinate, some of our activity with the 319 application. I think, if we can meld, those two paths forward together, I think it'd be sort of critical that we're, educating on the work that's happening in and around the town and in and around the creek. So one of the things that came up was a Know Your Watershed / Celebrate Your Creek type campaign and messaging. We've already got some good resources in place for those with the Clean Our Creek James Island and the Clemson Extension watershed signage. And I'll share this with Liz afterwards so she can distribute to the group. But we have a good list of existing resources that are out there that are great for folks that want to kind of take responsibility, take ownership of their relationship to the creek and how they impact the creek's health and its future. We also saw a real need for educational content about septic tank costs. What full replacement would be, what a drain field replacement would be. Understand that, lifespans on drain fields are maybe 10 to 20 years, depending on soil conditions, and that replacement costs for just the drain field can be rather significant. Also, properly maintained, what the yearly inspection and maintenance costs are with the tank. I think we should also include a piece in there about the cost of doing nothing, which is the sort of status quo and having a polluted creek. Kim Morganello from Clemson, who I don't think is here, or at least I don't see, brought up the idea of developing an educational strategy that would sort of identify what the barriers are to the messages that we want to deliver, define the benefits of those messages, and then also target, really selectively target the messages to various audiences. And so that's where I think we might consider, and we discussed this a little bit as well, we might consider enlisting the help of a PR firm to help effectively target both the materials and the messages to town residents so that we get the right response rather than just broadcasting it, really zeroing in. But we're hoping to be helpful. I think the Education and Engagement Committee is hoping to be helpful with the 319 grant fund. And if we conclude some of these components in there to help push those initiatives forward too, we'd be really interested in that. So anybody that was on that call wants to pipe in with anything I've missed, I'm all ears.
Well, I don't hear any extras. Are there any questions from anyone in the group for for Andrew? Hearing none, we will go on to our next policy report. And let's say Ross is busy with his new child. I don't know that we've delegated anyone to report on where the policy group is. I guess I'm on that committee, but I don't really have any specific report. I guess, in that group, we had talked about developing ordinances and regulations of septic tank use, and the town did adopt a requirement for our residents to inspect their septic tanks at least every 3 years and maintain their septic tank in good operating condition. And tonight we'll be considering for second reading a proposal that's slightly different, and that is for the town expense to do what we call a baseline inspection, a more thorough inspection of all the septic tanks in the town in the James Island Creek watershed. So any questions about the policy committee? All right, well, thank you. So next we'll go, yes.
It's not a question, but I thought that your ordinance about the septic tank inspection requirement, was a done deal, but it's been a while. So could you plan to circulate that to the members, especially to Councilmember Appel's committee members again? I do feel like that's sort of now a standard that we can all measure the other jurisdictions in terms of drafting our own septic
Yes, we'll be sure to. So it was adopted at the November meeting. And then what we're doing next is different. It's, a town appropriation of funds, and it does actually require the homeowners to accept the this more thorough inspection for those properties. Anyway, we'll be sure to share what we got. And presumably after that, I expect this will pass tonight, and we'll share what we have after tonight for the secondary ordinance. Anything else? All right, well, let's go to the 3.9 grant initial proposal. Who is going to speak to that?
I can try to give you an update.
Dave Schaefer.
Yeah, so right now we have Kyle, Michelle, and we spoke with Andy Miller and his team at DHEC. And they understand that we're going to be applying for the 319 money. The PSD is going to be spearheading that application. Based on that, the timing is really kind of February that we start the preliminary application with a due date by mid-March. Best case scenario, if the district is awarded the 319 money, it would be appropriated in August of 2022 spendable. So we will be working through that. It's my understanding it really is year by year based on the number of applicants, the amount of funding that's going to be available. And we will be pursuing that. Obviously, we want to show that we are looking for every possible way to fund this project. So we already have our engineer, Bob George, working on some of the preliminary information associated with that based on the application that's posted on DHEC's website from last year. So we have the engineer investigating that, and obviously more will be coming to the commission, the JIPSD commission in January, February, and March as we work towards that application.
All right, any questions? Yes, Carol.
Thank you, Dave. It's very encouraging to hear that you're marching along as the lead on the filing for this grant. So can you remind us or re-educate us, what are the eligible uses for whatever funding you're going to be asking for?
So this is based on prior, I mean, I can tell you what last year's was. And so the 319, obviously, we could not apply for the 319 funding last year because we did not have an approved watershed management plan from DHEC. So now we have the approved watershed management plan from DHEC. DHEC also knows that we attempted to apply for the $500,000 grant through the RIA, and they have all of that information as well, a 357-page grant application for that. And so that's what we spoke with Andy Miller about. Hey, you know, this is the Julian Clark neighborhood. These are up the hill a point. Here are the affected properties. And obviously, we're talking about putting in a sewer expansion project. And there would be obviously the construction portion of that. That's what would be eligible. The 319 money, as I understand it right now, we could not use that to acquire easements. I don't know if all of the engineering costs could be associated with that, but the actual physical construction of sewer expansion is what the 319 would go towards. And we have plenty of that construction cost to, you know, absorb into the 319 funds.
Any other further questions for Dave? You know, and Dave is the district administrator for the James Island Public Service District.
And Dave, how much money would you be applying for?
6.4. So the town has committed 1.8, and obviously we want to apply for everything, the gap between 1.8 and 8.2 million. So obviously we are applying for all of the connections to the homes, the the tap fees, the impact fees, everything like that. And we're applying for that entire gap so that they're right now, as what we're seeking, there would not be out of pocket tap fee and connection fees, impact fees to the residents for those 208 properties.
Thank you.
Any
Mayor
other
Wilkie,
questions or comments or discussion about where we are on that project?
This is Jenny Honeycutt.
Yes, Councilwoman Honeycutt.
Thank you. Two things. I just wanted to let everyone know that the county submitted its letter of support in for the grant that the chairman signed. And so the county is also a partner in all of this. Also, in our meeting in 40 minutes, there will be on our public works agenda a request that Ms. Johnson is bringing forward that Daniel Whaley Road be extended sewer as well. I believe there's several houses that will be built. I don't know if it's an actual access to the waterway or a pond that goes to the James Island Creek, but nevertheless, on the other side of Central Park Road, then up on the hill, they are requesting sewer as well. And the county, through Ms. Johnson, is putting forward that request to do that as well. So just wanted to put that on the radar.
And do you know what she's asking the county to provide, like the dollar amount?
No, I know that some constituents reached out to her. They reached out to me as well. And I think we're actually going to be discussing that in our meeting this evening.
Okay, thank you.
This is Kyle Michelle, if I could
Kyle?
jump in.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Just with a couple of small things to add to what Dave said, although he covered it pretty well. We, in our meeting with DHEC, they noted that we will need letters from each of the MS4 permit holders in the area. So that's we'll need the cooperation of the city and the county in getting those letters done for that application in February. And so I'm just kind of putting a pin in that for everybody to remember when we come back to you. And then we also had good long conversation since the last task force meeting with Representative Stavronakis, who's on the ARPA subcommittee of House Ways and Means Committee. And one thing that he stressed, and I'm just putting this out there for you guys' consideration, was the participation of any other local governments that received ARPA funds into the project to show their commitment for it. Town of James Island has already made this very strong commitment of $1.8+ million. But for the city and the county, when you get ready to allocate your ARPA funds, if you can find the support for putting, even $400,000 or $500,000, even if it's, we'd love more, but into this project so that we can go back to what looks like it's going to be the Rural Infrastructure Authority who's allocating this money and saying that we have local government ARPA commitments from all 3 local governments that are impacted. That would make our application for the funding stronger. I think I'd also note real fast that Dave and I have met not only with Stavronakis, we've met with Senator Sen up here in her office. We met with Senator Campson up here in Columbia. And so we've covered all of the legislative delegation, and now we're like I said, we met with DHEC, and we're covering all of the people that we need to cover before they allocate this first round of ARPA funding, which is expected in January. The House is expected to pass a bill in January and send it over to the Senate with the first round of the ARPA funding, and so we're teeing up everything for that right now.
Councilwoman Jackson.
Thank you, Dave and Kyle. One specific question. So the letter that you were referring to that needs to come from the MS4 jurisdictions, is that going to be different than the letter that Mayor Tecklenburg already signed earlier in the month, or
Yes.
around Thanksgiving, whenever?
And so anybody who has a watershed management plan, they want to know, even though we do not have a combined system of sewer and stormwater, they want documentation from anybody who has a stormwater management plan that our sewer expansion isn't gonna somehow harm the stormwater collection for that specific area. And so
those whatever you want to be stated will be sent to the city, for example, as far as a
yes,
cookie cutter.
And our engineer is working to be able to get that request well in advance of when we have to apply.
Okay. And then I just have, maybe I'm the only person that's a little clueless about are we talking about 2 different pots of money when we say the 319, we're asking them for the full construction cost minus the contribution that the town's already committed to, so the 6.4, and we're going for ARPA funds, or are they one and the same, or how do those pots of money relate to each other?
Okay, so the 319 money is administered through DHEC. So DHEC has its own pot of money. And based on the number of applicants for 319 funds, they distribute those among the applicants on an annual basis. So that is a separate pot of money. The town has committed the $1.8 million out of their ARPA money that was distributed to the town. However, the feds have pushed down a tremendous amount of money to the state, and then the state has to distribute those ARPA funds. Our understanding is that they're going to take a good chunk of that money and give it to the RIA. Now, the RIA historically has given out $500,000 grants to help support projects. However, that's because they have very limited funds to distribute. And this, once in a lifetime kind of distribution from the feds, that'll be different. And the RIA is already well aware of our sewer expansion project because we applied back in September for that. So there's a separate pot of ARPA money from the state. And it's our understanding right now that it will be like 2 rounds of ARPA. And so that first round in January, we hope that there is an appropriation for this project. And if there isn't, then we got to go for the second round. And if we don't see that, then, we have to go for the surplus, the state's surplus which is the non-recurring projects.
But
So-
all the while, we're still pursuing the 319 money as like a parallel track, essentially.
Yes,
We're-
yes.
We're running on two tracks.
Because we don't know that we're gonna get 319 money and
Right.
spendable till August, whereas if they have this money in January, we got Kyle Michelle in Columbia shaking that money tree as hard as he can.
Okay, I mean, that's the crux of, we're doing it all, but we know that we've got the chance of two different sources of funds and we're going for both of them.
Yes,
Absolutely.
Councilwoman, it's when you put yourselves in their shoes, and once we explain it, you understand that the legislators say, well, wait a minute, we've got this money that can be spent on this, but this DHEC 319 money is EPA money. It's federal money that comes to the state every year that can only be spent on this narrow class of things. So they're going to say, wait a minute, you guys, did you go get all the 319 money that you could get so we don't have to spend our money on that? You could spend the 319 money and then we'll give you what's left. We want to make sure you're looking for everything possible. So that's the directive we've gotten from Ways and Means and Finance. So we're running that path. And if we're so fortunate in the end as to get more money than we need, which I don't think is going to happen, we'll deal with that problem when we're so fortunate as to have it. So, and Dave is exactly right. Everything he said is accurate. The timing is first part of ARPA, January. By the time the Senate gets finished chewing on it, it'll probably be February. That money will go over to RIA. That money will start getting out. In February, the DHEC application, the initial intent to apply, I think is due. That application goes in by the end of February or March. They decide, as Dave said, Dave, did you say August? And then, but they'll know what they're going to do prior to that. The non-recurring money in the state budget, which is almost as much as the ARPA money, will almost for sure be spent, all of it by June. So those are sort of then the second round of ARPA, it can be this year, but given the amount of money they're putting on the street with the first round of ARPA, $1.3 billion, and all the non-recurring, almost $2 billion. I wouldn't be surprised if they held back some of that ARPA money later, just because there's only so many avenues to actually put workers on the ground to spend that kind of money on those kinds of projects. And so they may want to space it out, even though the ARPA money does have to be obligated by December 31st, 2024 and spent by December 31st, 2026.
26.
Yes, out the door, spent, not in your checkbook anymore. Obligated 24, spent 26.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you very much.
Happy to answer any other questions on that.
Any further questions or just comments on the grant proposals and the efforts to get money to for sewage? All right, hearing none, thank you so much, especially for Kyle and Dave for all your information. So next we'll go to our fall sample report, our update from Walpert. And so I guess, Brett, you already sort of introduced. Are we ready to go, or Jacob, do you want to just start?
Yes, sir. I just got ability to screen share, so I will do so. And yes, so I've already been introduced, so that was great to knock that out at the beginning. I was asked to give some highlights, some fairly quick highlights of the memo. The memo will be more detailed, show more data, talk about the data in more detail, but to keep it high level and hopefully show you some visuals are my goals here. So we've got, I want a very quick agenda for a quick presentation, monitoring objectives. Our objectives are to identify where are bacteria sources in this watershed, and then what kinds of sources are they? Are they human? Are they dog? Is it wildlife? Is it some or all of the above? And overall, the information so far suggests some or all of the above. Then we're going to look at some locations in the watershed. Brett gave me a good intro there. Talk about the Enterococcus sampling, and then talk about microbial source tracking. All right, so here is a map that is from the James Island Creek Watershed Plan. I've taken it and added a couple more notations. So you can see James Island Creek JIC number 1 is at Harborview Road Bridge in the lower part of the watershed. That is one of our sampling locations from the effort here in the first quarter. We also sought to sample at JIC 2, which was a private dock. As Brett mentioned, we looked for other locations since we couldn't get the access there that we needed. So we've been sampling at Riley Road. At the end of Riley Road, there's sort of a small boat ramp that gives us access there in the upper part of the watershed. And then the Folly Road Bridge is the purple star on there. Wanted to note that because, like I said, we met earlier this week, and that's a place that we're going to want to be sampling in the upcoming. So the idea with these locations, this map will I think have some more dots on it by the time we're done. This is a dynamic effort to track down these sources and sample different places and cut the watershed up and see what we can learn while still, getting the access we need to sample at various places. So everything from here on out, Harborview Bridge is our downstream and Riley Road is our upstream for purpose of discussion. So going to get into some Enterococcus results, again, much more detail in the memo. So I think at this point, we're all familiar with the idea that Enterococcus is an indicator bacteria used to identify potential fecal contamination. Our sampling approach in a tidal system like this is to take multiple samples at a location on a given day. The concentrations tend to vary with tidal conditions as water moves in from different places. And we've seen that to be true under wet and dry conditions. So we seek to sample under both, looking at dry conditions. That's how we know if the wet conditions are any different. Are numbers up, are they down? What can we learn by that comparison? So we're going to jump quickly to a pretty technical plot. This is one of the appendices from the memo. At the top, we have rainfall. At the bottom, we have time. We have tide represented, and we also have some sample results. I know we're all looking at this on not huge screens probably, so I want to just zoom in on sample results to give an idea of how Enterococcus results may vary. So again, this was well, I'll flip back, and if you look at the rainfall up there, you can see we had 2 bands of rainfall, sort of a long spread out storm. And then the sampling opportunity, which again has to line up with laboratory hours, was here on this falling tide. So as we sampled that falling tide, Riley Road, the upstream is in blue, and you can see that those results varied from 600 MPN per 100 mil to as high as 8,000, with MPN just being a most probable number of bacteria colonies in a given sample. Just those are the units of those results. And at Harborview Bridge, our downstream site varied from around 100 to around 800 MPN per 100 mil. So this was it's hard to catch a great wet weather sampling event, but with the lab hours and the different factors involved, and you'd like to get some falling tide as water's flushing. But we did sort of, you can see how those concentrations changed over this flushing here. Again, much more about Enterococcus in the memo. To keep it high level, just wanted to talk about microbial source tracking. Powerful tool, the high level version, it's a set of laboratory methods used to determine the host that contributes fecal pollution to a water body. It's based on the principles that, the intestines or the guts of every animal is a unique environment. The bacteria that live in that environment are also unique. And then those bacteria will leave the gut along with the fecal matter of that organism. And so you can look for the DNA of those gut bacteria in order to detect that a given organism is a potential source of that fecal matter. So following that train of logic, you can answer some of that. Where's it from? What is the source? So I wanted to give a nod to some of the efforts that have been done before us. That would be Charleston Water Systems. They did some microbial source tracking. They sampled at 3 different locations, JIC 1, JIC 2, and also a Simpson Creek site, sort of one of the side arms of the creek coming in there. On 2 occasions, they did MST at 3 locations. We'll just want to try to put those results into some context. So if you squint a little, you can see that those results are in the hundreds or perhaps the thousands of copies per 100 mil, meaning copies of DNA. Again, we're looking at the DNA of the gut bacteria, and it's a different set of units from your normal bacteria reporting units. You're measuring different things. They're often related. If you have fecal matter, you may have enterococci and you may have human sources or other sources, bird, dog, but they're different things. So to take those numbers and sort of make, 10 to the 2, 10 to the 3, 10 to the 5, to make it more visual, here's a look at sort of how those lab results come in. So the lab will either give you a no detect, which means they did not detect anything. They'll give you a low DNQ, which would be a did not quantify. So it was detected, but it was below the quantification limit of the test. There's also sort of a low but quantifiable amount, and then a moderate and higher amount. And these are, again, orders of magnitude. Like to think about with MST, is this source present or not? And is it a lot or a little? Don't squint at the numbers all too much. But from that initial effort, they saw, amounts of human and bird and trace lower amounts of dog. And those sources were consistent at the 3 different sites for the wet weather event that Charleston Water Systems did. So that was interesting to see and a great first point of information. To hop back to our sort of technical graph here, we chose to do microbial source tracking for one of the samples at the upstream location where we had a higher result. And this was one of the 4 MST analyses that are currently scoped to happen. We've got 4 in our pocket, and we're trying to, we're using them strategically. And this was the first one that we decided to use. So to zoom in a little bit, here are those results. And we had low to trace amounts of human and dog, and moderate amounts of bird. Those are the results from that day, from that location. And the larger picture shows how it kind of falls into the rainfall and everything and the tides. What's one thing to think about? So here we are at an upstream location. The way you would sort of track down your sources is if you ran MST at a lower location, you can see how are those different from each other on a given day. Lots of factors, but if you look at things on a given day, did something change from Riley Road to JIC2 or from JIC2 to JIC1, or perhaps, other sites to come? And that's sort of the nature of doing this, cutting the watershed up and trying to find where is it and what is it. So the second quarter of sampling, the fall has been underway. For our purposes, fall ends at the end of December, and we'll be working on bringing the next memo together in the new year and getting that to the committee. So that's what I've got for you. And I'll kick it back to the mayor. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jacob. Any questions?
Hey, Jacob.
Yes, Councilman Milliken.
Yeah, so my question is this upstream location at Riley Road, is that a really good representative location of the other locations that you tested?
So it's a representative upstream place to start. JIC2 was sought out for consistency with previous efforts. But again, we're doing land-based sampling. We couldn't get the access on the dock that we needed, so we were looking at other locations. And I think between Riley Road and bringing in JIC2, basically doing, instead of 4 at 2 locations, 3 at 3 is sort of the upcoming approach. And I think that will help us, again, piece apart that upper watershed nicely. Wanting to start upper and lower and evolve and innovate as we go.
Yes, I understand the difficulty in doing these kinds of samples and the variability that you're going to be faced with. But I was just wondering if there was a way to look for any kind of inter-rater reliability based on flow and location, say between 2 upstream sites and 2 downstream sites. Do something to get a little more verification of the data that you're getting.
Sure. So I'll flip back to the map as I'm still sharing here. I will say in terms of working your way through the watershed, there are no major creek arms that come in between, say, JIC2 and Riley Road, but there are another set of residences and businesses and things to look at in between. So,
all right,
I think it's a good exploratory location, but the more the merrier for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I would like to just break in and again encourage our testing to include the site we identified at the at Battery Point. We
Sure.
we haven't got that completely settled, I understand, because of some issue, but we should look into that. Any other questions or comments? Dave, did
Mr.
you have
Chairman?
something? No, Carol.
Yeah, thank you. And this is probably not for Jacob, but in terms of, all this data collection that is going to be more, I guess, more solidified in terms of the takeaways and the trends that we should be able to make use of. Where is the data collection going to come into play with our grant applications? Are we going to be, put to the test on maybe there's not enough evidence or not as much evidence of human toxicity than we thought, just with the one set of tests that CWS was able to provide? Or, I certainly wouldn't want our grant application to be dependent on data collection that is going to be more informative as time goes on, right? So I don't know, who knows if there's any corollary to that at this point in time, but that's what my brain is curious about.
This is Brett.
Yes, go ahead, Brett.
I don't know of any conditions per this grant, but it sounds like David and Mike would be able to speak on that more than the technical committee.
Dave, or Mike, Kyle, do you have any?
So all of, within the RIA application, obviously the engineer puts all of these narratives. Not only do we include the watershed management plan, we have narratives in the grants associated with, the testing results and the endpoint sources. So everything that, we have as far as this data, we're going to be able to include that within the narratives to be able to show, here's the watershed management plan. This is, the third party objective said we should be working on this stuff. And so anything associated with making improvements to the watershed or some of these endpoint sources, we want to be able to include that within the grant narratives.
Well, so I'll comment. We have no choice but to develop this data, and I don't see how we can avoid sharing it. And so we'll just see what the data shows, and as we go forward.
And Mayor, if you don't mind, I'll chime in just very
briefly
from the city side.
Thank
you. I think the grant applications obviously have merit from the TMDL because obviously removing septic is a benefit to a TMDL for a fecal coliform based pollutant, right? That's one of those default 100% EPA, the 319 grant program, even from an RIA perspective, which is multiple things that they're looking at. Those are without doubt beneficial things to be doing. From our task force perspective, we have a number of things we're balancing, right? Septic tank is like a structural item, a structural BMP, basically, of saying we'll remove septics. That's one way to remove. We're also looking at education, outreach policy. So we have to keep all of those things in mind. And I think, again, septic has a lot of benefits in addition to just the impacts on the TMDL, but it certainly does have a strong benefit to the TMDL. Will it be enough to do all of it? That's what we don't know yet. We don't know if it would completely remove contamination in the creek. And having said that, nothing will completely remove some level of contamination from bird and other things that are naturally occurring. We want to get it back down to healthy levels that you can use the creek for its intended purposes. And I think the data is really early for the data. I mean, that's you'll see all of us engineers like hedging horribly so far with data because we only have so little sampling. But it is actually so far relatively supportive, I think, of what we've seen and what CWS has seen, and that kind of the more extreme upper end of the watershed. And again, yes, there's some two directional flow, but generally there's this predominant flow out into the Ashley. We're not seeing as much impact from human in that extreme upper end at like Riley Road, but that's also not where the majority of the septic tanks are. And then we are seeing higher loads down as we get out towards where the neighborhoods with the septic tanks are. So, I mean, there is some support certainly in the data. I think we've we've been looking at. And again, really early. I don't want to say it's any kind of conclusion yet, but the first blush of data does generally support the approach that maybe septic will be a major improvement by itself to the watershed, much less whatever else we're working on. So I think it's good, and we're all going the right direction. There's always a question of cost benefit of how much money are you willing to invest, but that's a side question. And septic, or sewer is expensive, but it's expensive because it's a massive benefit to the property owners as well. So I appreciate the chance to kind of touch on that, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions regarding this? Yes, Dave.
Yeah, and so, my hope is that we had my commission has a wastewater committee. And obviously, as we have more data and we get more results, I would, welcome Jacob, and Andrew Wonderly to come, to the wastewater committee meeting. Their public meetings. My commissioners are there to be able to, show these results so that we can have that presented to the decision makers that are ultimately applying for these grants and using money to construct potential sewer expansion. So thank you.
How have we distributed the memo to the members of the task force yet?
The one
I don't think so.
So I think
I sent
that should be done.
Yeah, I sent the summary report to Liz Bailey, and I thought she might send it out, but I don't think it did make it out.
Well, I think that would be a good idea. I don't think we quite have them on the Town of James Island website yet, but we're working towards that goal to get them on there as well. And I also would hope that, the educational committee, as we think about, what is our, web presence, Facebook presence, whatever our presence is going to be, as a task force, we need to get that information available to the public, promptly, I believe. All right, any other questions or comments about this? All right, hearing none, let's go to update from South Carolina Legislative Delegation. Do we have any state representatives here to report on what's going on? I don't see Senator Sen or Representative Wetmore here today. And so I guess we got Kyle Michael giving it from our end. But I don't see anyone. And so let's go ahead to new business from the new business. And so this is update for federal infrastructure funds delivery through South Carolina Legislator Governor's Office. Who would speak to that? Yes,
Mr. Chair. I contacted our delegation reps specifically to James Island, Senator Wetmore and Senator Sen. I didn't have a chance to reach out to Representative Stavronakis, but my understanding from them is that the separate federal funding stream let's just call it infrastructure, the Infrastructure and Jobs Act, or whatever it actually is, coming in a whole different boat and a different delivery system. They're still waiting for the federal criteria to be developed. And maybe Mayor Tecklenburg knows a little more about that. I don't know. But I do think that as long as we keep our eye on that prize as another, aim of our shotgun for money in all locations, then that's just what I'm assuming and assured of, that our delegates from the legislature will be apprising us. But it's great to have Mr. Michael on board with us as well, to have his ear to the ground in Columbia. So
I understand. So it's what we call the infrastructure bill includes a sewer component, and how is that going to be available to us? And we don't have an answer to that at this time.
No, they're working on waiting for the criteria for delivery from the federal side.
Carol suggested, Mayor Tecklenburg, that you might have the inside scoop on that. Have you heard anything?
I see Kyle raising his hand. I don't have any new.
Okay, I'm sorry, Kyle. What do you know about
No
that?
problem. No problem.
I'm more than happy to wait my turn because I know I'm sort of an add-on to the group here. The federal infrastructure bill, for anybody who's been around for a decade or more, looks a lot like the Obama stimulus bill from 2009. It basically pushes money, additional money through existing programs. It looks a lot different from the American Rescue Plan Act, which is ARPA, which basically just gave big chunks of money to states and local governments. So the 80% or 77 or 80% of the money goes through existing programs to the states. Another 20 or 22% is reserved at the federal level for competitive grant distribution at the federal level. But on the wastewater side, it's an extra $2.4 billion a year into the state revolving fund for divided among the 50 states. So the way that we will see almost all the money for what we are looking for James Island Creek is, and I'm looking over at my computer when I look over here, is that we will see the South Carolina portion of the state revolving fund greatly increased for the next 5 years. And so that is the money that goes to DHEC and to RIA that Dave put the application in for last year, that we're going to put the application in for again this next year. So hopefully that will increase our chances of getting money from that if we don't otherwise get the money before that money hits the coffers there. There's other wastewater money, but the 11.7 billion over 5 years in wastewater money, I'm sorry, that goes into state revolving fund, 1 billion nationwide into clean water state revolving fund for emerging contaminants. That's the PFAS and the PFOA issue. Then there's 100 million nationwide over 5 years, 20 million a year nationwide for wastewater energy efficiency projects. That's like biogas and those kind of things. And another 120. You get into these little small amounts that aren't meaningfully going to impact our state over 5 years nationwide money. But the state revolving fund is where we're going to see most of that federal infrastructure money for the James Island project.
All right, well, thank you. Any questions or about that? So that's, to me, I would, and I'm glad this came up. It's, this one-time American Rescue Plan money. We may be, if that doesn't play, we can't get all the money we need from that. The state should be somewhat more flush than they have been in the past with this other money going forward. So,
yes.
Summary, yes.
And state non-recurring funds. I mean, the amount of money that we are generating in excess of what our budget is for the last 2 years is so great that there will be strong pressure on the legislature when they return in January to pass a tax cut.
Okay.
All
right.
Sorry. Could I ask one more question about
Carol.
timing? I mean, knowing that we have these different opportunities that don't, the delivery is not in sync necessarily. Asking Dave and our PSD friends, will there be a big challenge to getting, part of the money 1 year and part of the money the next year? Are we going to have to save it up then and, issue one big construction contract? I mean, I have a hard time imagining that we're going to be able to build new sewer systems in that sort of yearly phase.
Yeah, so the actual construction of the sewer expansion is going to be predominantly, directional drill. And those companies, that technology has advanced tremendously over the past decade. Those people are surgical with those directional drilling equipment. I mean, it's a matter of weeks to do those 208 properties and drill that. It's far longer of a lead time to get all of the grant applications, to get all of the engineering the permitting, the acquisition and easements and everything like that, that is the longer lead time. And so that's what we're, working on now. It's going to be tough to mobilize a directional drilling company to do it like in phases. Obviously, that's going to be more expensive to mobilize those crews. The objective would be to have enough funding to be able to knock out, especially in that Julian Clark neighborhood. We don't want multiple disruptions, in the rights of way and everything like that. That's going to make it much more taxing on the residents in that neighborhood. So yeah, we would want to be able to cobble together the components until it makes sense to mobilize that directional drilling crew.
All right, any other questions or comments? Well, hearing none, I think we've run through our agenda. Is there anything else?
Mayor,
Yes, Mayor Tecklenburg.
I checked with Liz and there was a Dropbox link on everybody's invite. And although it says it's a link to the watershed, it also contains the TMDL report as well. So if there was some other report other than those two that are in the Dropbox that we haven't distributed, if y'all don't mind sending it to Liz again, and we'll be sure to get it out to everybody.
All right, well, thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, I have that our next meeting is Thursday, February 17th at 4 p.m. And so there being no further business, the meeting is hereby adjourned. Thank you so much.
Happy holidays, everyone. Merry Christmas.
Yeah. Merry Christmas.
Thank you all.
Merry Christmas.